Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Taking Diversity, Equity, Inclusion to the Next Level webinar. It's part of our series together with Workhuman. I'm your host, Thomas Papp. Today we shall have a very, very exciting day with a number of great presentations. Thanks again for Workhuman to support this event and bring this event to us. June is LGBTQ Pride Month. It's really all about acceptance instead of tolerance. So it's one thing that we should all remember and work towards. A sense of belonging and inclusion for all people, not only at work. Some of the questions that come to mind when this topic comes to my mind is how we improve on engagement, productivity, and workplace relations by taking diversity, equity, and inclusion to the next level. First up, we will have Niamh Graham, the Senior Vice President of the Global Human Experience at Workhuman. We will have a conversation with Niamh on these topics. How can we attract talent through completing and including recruitment strategies? Mark Lomas, he's the head of culture, Lloyd's of London. Mark will be giving us a keynote session on attracting talent through completing and inclusive recruitment strategies. So that shall be the second session. And then after that, we shall be talking about what will workplace diversity inclusion look like by 2025, and what should HR executives be doing today to prepare. So this shall be the third session that we will have today. This shall be a panel discussion. And our panelists, Stuart Curtis, Senior Director of Global Talent Development for Workhuman, Kushbo Patel, Head of Engagement and Inclusion for Metro Bank, and Christoph Heldy, Chief People Officer of Ringier AG. This shall be happening as our last session. So now I would like to welcome our first speaker to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Niamh, it's great to have you with us. Niamh, please, if you could unmute your microphone. We can see you, but we cannot hear you just yet. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
The old trick. Very good. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. It always catches you out, doesn't it? I'm joining you from Dublin in Ireland, so I see everybody commenting there, the Netherlands, India, Frankfurt, London. So great to have such an international gathering this morning. Great.
Indeed. And Niamh, it's great to have you with us and have the opportunity to talk about this very, very important topic, which is really at the forefront of discussion at the moment. It has been for a long time, but I think now it's even more than before. And I would like to start the conversation with my first question, I guess, is in your view, how is workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion being defined in 2023, and how can companies go the extra mile by incorporating belonging to take diversity inclusion to the next level?
Yeah, no, great question. Loads in there. And I think a next level is required. We did some research recently with Gallup, and it was so startling, when we asked kind of HR professionals and companies if they felt they were going the next level, moving the needle from a DEI and a belonging perspective, because that's obviously a really important part of it. And a whopping 97% from a HR or business perspective said they felt they were moving the needle, that they had made changes to improve DEI. However, when the question was asked of the employee population, a mere 37% felt that that was the case indeed. So there's a huge delta there between what companies and HR leaders, and I'm an HR leader, obviously, in terms of what we feel or those surveyed feel that they're doing and how they're taking things to the next level, versus what employees are feeling. So that's a major gap that has to be actually, narrowed. It has to be brought together. And why is that? And looking at the different perspectives is really, really important, I think. You can look at the company's perspective, as we just said there, the educational aspect of things in terms of what a company provides, and the employee-led and company, and combining it all together, I think, is really, really important. If you don't have that combination of all of those different levels of engagement and interactions with that lens, with that kind of multi-lens approach and multi-mindset approach, I think that gap will continue to remain, actually, Thomas. So that's really important just to call that out. There is a gap there. There's lots of work to be done. I think when we think about the definition, DEI, and that is belonging, that as I mentioned, that I think that's a really important part, because you can have a strategy, you may have goals, whether it's hiring more females into your organization, whether that's hiring more cultural diversity in your organization. However, if you don't have a strategy to support that, whether it be from a retention perspective, from a development perspective, you will never have that sense of belonging. And the belonging piece is the piece that's really, really important when you take it and look at it at the human level. We always say we're all humans, and having that sense of belonging and having that sense of purpose in an organization, because one spends so much time at their workplace, whether it's in their physical workplace at the company on-site perspective, or your home workplace, that's really important. And so when I think about belonging, I feel like it needs to have that sense of purpose where you can be your true self at work with your colleagues, in an environment and in a culture where you can recognize one another, you can connect with one another, you can have frequent check-ins with one another, formally and informally, and you can celebrate one another from a professional perspective, but also from a personal perspective as well, and that you have that different degree of engagement amongst your employee population, which is very, very different in terms of, company to employee. You're talking about company to employee, employee to employee, employee to company. And that listening part is a very important part in relation to strategy. And so when I think about the definition, it has to include all of those different things. And I think about the strategy, it has to include all of those different things. And if you don't have one, you won't have the other. So if you don't have a HR strategy or a business related strategy rich from a DI perspective, you won't get that that level of success, narrowing that gap in terms of what employees think, what their companies thinks, what HR thinks, and that's really important, that you meet in the middle and that it's successful for all of the different parties, I think, included. That's really, really important. So one needs to look at it very holistically, stand back and see what those measurements are and how you can take it to the next level. One of our customers, LinkedIn, if I can share a little example, they have a peer-to-peer recognition program. They use our technology for that. It's called Bravo. And part of their strategy was to see how recognition could impact positively retention, inclusivity and performance. And when they did their analysis of their program, they did find that there was a direct correlation with employees receiving over 4 awards, that they had a 96% indication from a retention perspective. I think that was a 10% increase from what it was before. And they saw across the population, 54% of their employee population, their performance increase. So there's the business aspects as well when we think about retention, performance, when we think about supporting employees across a whole organization, whether it be global or otherwise, but having thinking about your employees from obviously a diverse perspective, from a fairness perspective, from a fully inclusive perspective, and then the benefits, as I mentioned. I know Great Place to Work actually did a survey on this quite recently, where they said where you do have a really successful program from an inclusivity perspective, from a belonging perspective, and such metrics like 3x times, their employees feel like they're look forward to coming to work, 3x times their workplace is fun. This is what those respondents said as a result of being part of an inclusive work environment. 9x in terms of being treated fairly. So when you think about all of the different aspects from a DEI perspective, that's really important. And 5x times want to stay in their companies for a long time. So the metrics are there, the results are there, And so identifying and defining, to answer your question from the start, is really, really important, because if you don't answer that definition, if you don't have a strategy and a goal to take it to the next level and continuously take it to the next level, you will not see the positive business results or the positive people results. And, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, you want your employees to be happy, you want them to be engaged, you want them to stay with you. And as I said, it's mutually beneficial all around. So yeah, taking it to the next level, work in progress, ongoing, lots still to be done there.
Indeed, it really has to become part of the culture, and not just on the surface, but really, it feeds into my next question. I guess you've touched on some of this already. How can HR professionals transition from DEI programs to fostering continuous DEI improvement within a company, ensuring it becomes an ongoing part of its DNA, including the use of inclusive language?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I did touch on a couple of different things. Maybe we go a little bit deeper, Thomas, on a couple of those areas. So obviously, you know, when we think about hiring, developing, retaining, you're looking at all of the different KPIs or goals that you would have, and reviewing those very frequently and elevating those. That's the whole point, continuous improvement. That's really important, and that is very intentional from a business perspective, and that your employees see that it's very intentional. And you know, the other part of that, the other side of that is, you know, engaging with your employees. What do you want? Where do you see we're not doing as well as you would like us to see? And having different, you know, focus groups, whether it be from a gender perspective, whether it be from an ethnic perspective, whether it be from an age perspective, whether it be from a geo perspective. I mean, you need to look at it from all of those different angles, I think, and be very inclusive when you're thinking about focus groups and when you're setting those up. And I suppose the third part of it is, so the people strategy, the inclusive strategy, when you think about embracing your people, in terms of what that strategy looks like overall. And the third aspect is obviously the data, the people analytics part of it. That's hugely important, because if you can't measure all of the things that you're trying to achieve, how are you going to make that continuous, you know, elevation of all of those different initiatives? So that's really important. So everything from total rewards, for example, obviously, you know, when we think about pay gender gap reporting, for example, I mean, that's massive at the moment across Europe. All of new legislation is being rolled out where companies, in Ireland, for example, last year, new legislation, you know, you must publish your pay gender gap reporting, you must share your pay equity details and strategy. And I know it's been rolled out across all of Europe and the world. We have, you know, MEPED Massachusetts, where we also have a location where it's the Massachusetts equity legislation and so on. And that's all brilliant. That's all brilliant to have that. Shouldn't have to have it, really, but it's great that we have that, and we're moving more towards a very transparent way of working as companies, as HR leaders, and that's beneficial obviously for our employees. And that means we're held accountable, we're responsible, we take initiative, and we take ownership in relation to, you know, fostering continuous improvement, and that's part of our DNA. So that's where it becomes part of our DNA when it comes to life. When you have that kind of approach, when you have that mindset, and shifting that is not easy. When you think about very large organizations, for example, like, you need to have really great leaders from the top across the whole organization that embrace that new way of thinking. And it's essential, because if you think about our up and coming employees, for example, you know, the Gen Z, I mean, that's an essential requirement when you think about not just language, but when you think about what type of an environment, what type of culture, you know, those younger generations want to come in. And when I talk to my teenage children, what they're looking for is very different to what I was looking for, you know, many years ago, and things have just shifted. And so when you think about language, and even, you know, your procedures, your policies, like, all of that language has to change. How you hire, you know, how you post job descriptions, all of that language has to shift gears massively. It has to be in tune with who your demographic is, and who your demographic is going to be. Because if you're not thinking about the future, you're not ahead in terms of what that looks like. And you'll get that chink in your DNA then, in terms of, you know, that you know, it's going to break if you don't have a robust DNA that supports from, you know, company perspective, and from a language perspective, and holistic, and not one size fits all. I mean, every company is in a different phase. You have different sizes, you have different demographics, you have different industry sectors where you may have different employee profile groups then as well. So you must be in tune with your own organization and how that looks from a profile perspective. When I say look, not physically look, I'm talking about everything that you see and everything that you don't see as well, when you think about the whole self, the whole human self. So that's really, really important. And again, some startling, when I did some research on this, there was a recent report on elevating equity, real story of diversity and inclusion. And a whopping 76% of companies in that particular report did not have diversity or inclusion goals, and do not have it included in their company and leadership development strategy. I mean, it's so surprising that would be the case right now, when people should be shifting gears even more now than ever, when we think about how our ways of working have changed, when we think about how you include your workforce when it's a hybrid workforce or when it's a remote workforce. That's not going away. That continues to change. Yes, the norms are changing in relation to kind of what that split looks like, for sure. But it's really, really important that you have, you're always looking ahead and always catering to what's important to your organization, and adjusting accordingly to make that successful, as I said, for everybody. When I'm thinking about things, I'm always thinking, okay, what's going to be really successful for our employees, successful for the company, and successful for our culture. And if you look at all those different ways, and hopefully you will be successful in relation to that, because obviously the outcome is positive for everybody all around.
Indeed, and it's so what you highlighted with the different generations and those gaps, and how important it is for us to understand that each generation have their own way of their own language, and we need to really see that. And I have some teenage kids as well, and their language relating to work is going to be so different. It's already different. They're already talking about a lot of advanced. They have a lot more advanced understanding about diversity inclusion, in my opinion, than what we had, and that's shifting into the world of work more and more, which it should. Let's ask the audience how. Let's have a poll now. How do you ensure your employees use inclusive language? So I would love to hear from everyone. Just submit your answers if you could. If you go to the poll for whatever reason it's not coming up, it should come up on your screen. Yep, there we go. We are getting responses already, so that's great. We'll just give it a few more minutes just to make sure that people can respond to this, and we'll close it in a few minutes. There's a few seconds of lag in the response. So we've got 44% of the respondents say we trust them to use the right words. Then 40% says we provide training, and the rest, we use tools to detect and educate employees about bias. So what is your view on this result? Yeah.
I don't think I'm surprised. Interesting, though. I think, there's different approaches that companies take in relation to. And, when I was reading, I got the poll myself, actually. I quickly answered the poll when it came up on screen there. I wanted to answer all three, I think. That was if I could have. It wouldn't let me do that. So I did answer in terms of technology and tools, supporting your initiatives. But yeah, the others are relevant as well, obviously. I guess, thinking about technology and innovation, and again, thinking about how companies use technology, whether it's interacting, whether it's communicating like this, for example, whether it's social feeds that many companies have, it could be social recognition, it could be your intrasite, it could be whatever communications your tools you're using, whether it's Zoom, Slack, Teams, whatever the case may be. I mean, technology is massive. You use technology to book meeting rooms virtually or in person. You DM people. I mean, technology is just everywhere in our working world right now. And so for me, when I think about technology and how it can really bridge that gap that I started out talking about, I think bridging that gap, I think technology and innovation appropriate to DEI and belonging strategy is really, really important, because I think that will bridge that gap, and I think that will create a different experience for employees than what they're feeling right now, because the survey says that they're feeling differently right now in terms of how their companies are embracing diversity and equity and inclusion, how they're feeling as a person in terms of belonging to an organization. So I think technology and innovation is massively important, and I think I would encourage everybody to look at that and look at different tools. And I think what technology does, it enables a couple of different things when we think about this. This type of strategy and this kind of cultural initiative and cultural shift for a lot of organizations, because a lot of organizations are struggling with this. So it can definitely be a shift, and it can be a massive step for a lot of organizations. So what technology enables, I feel, is, it brings people together, connects people, because that's how new technology is built. It connects people. It enables people to engage with one another, to celebrate those life events, those achievements in the workplace, whether it's promotions, for example. Like, can you imagine if everybody had a platform where they could celebrate everybody's promotion in a way that you could add, photographs or a quick video or a video message or something like that, and that you could have work circles whereby, groups, whether it's geographically or functionally or teams, for example, that you got to celebrate that. I mean, that makes people feel included. That makes people feel really good. And if you do that, obviously, from a general total rewards perspective, when you think about recognition, again, brilliant in relation to that. And that brings everybody, that brings the human person. So you're not just an employee number, you're not just an employee ID on your normal record system, if you like. You have your profile there, you have your picture there, you have your history of all of the great things, whether it's years of service, for example, whether it's achieving project milestones, whether it's working on great team awards. And we're all companies, I think, at the moment are working on how teams across time zones, maybe across different functional areas. It has been over the course of the last couple of years, I think a lot of HR leaders would say it has been challenging how to figure out how to bring people together and how to bring, productivity to a level when we have all of this different ways of working. And so doing that in a way where technology can enable that is going to be, essential. And having a way that you can review it, enhance it, record it, not record it, I mean, review it in terms of actually making changes and having that be part of your future strategy going forward is really important. Again, when we think of equity, when we think of fairness, when we think of diversity, and there is, we've done a lot of research ourselves actually in relation to this, whereby there has been differences in certain companies when you think about gender, when you think about ethnicity, when you think about recognition, and how again bridging that gap. It's about bridging that gap, treating everybody the exact same, removing that unconscious bias, and people don't realize that they have that necessarily. And so having that data that makes a difference is going to be really important, and having technology to enable that. And when it's from the top down and the bottom up and across the whole organization, that's really important if you have technology to enable you to do that. And, again, that sense of belonging, thinking about creating those culture heroes, that's what we refer to them in our organization, culture heroes, or, our superhumans, or, those that make a difference to the organization. That's really important. And how you can have ambassadors and cultural ambassadors that actually work with you and alongside you to help. It shouldn't just be, HR needs to fix that. I feel like everybody in an organization has a role to play, no matter what their background is, has a role to play in being fully inclusive in an organization. And using AI and natural language processing is really important. Again, having that be part of your toolkit is going to be really important. And again, the results are there in terms of what that looks like. Teams are more productive, companies are more profitable, you have more diversity, you have more engagement, you have more, equality and more fairness, and people feel like that's a really great environment to be in. So all the positivities are there. I might share before, I know we're finishing up shortly. One of our other customers, Merck, if I might share a little bit about their program, they were looking at how they could increase this whole conversation we've been having, actually, Thomas. They were looking at how they can bridge that gap, how they can be more inclusive as an organization. And so they rolled out a new way, a new, more future, modern way of performance called Inclusion Reflections. And what that was about, more about reflections from an employee's perspective, an employee-led reflection into that whole performance discussion, rather than the traditional kind of company-led, the one that everybody doesn't really like going through. But it's more about positive, being more robust, being more inclusive. And so that was one part of the program that they rolled out, which nudges employees to think, am I thinking about things fairly? Am I treating everybody equally, for example? And another aspect of it was Inclusion Advisor, again, using natural language processing to see when people were either recognizing one another or sending message of congratulations for a particular milestone, for example, to see was there, language bias or unconscious bias there. And they found, when their program launched, they did a review over 6 months, 12 months, for example, at Merck, and 74% of their employees changed their recognition message to a colleague as a result of the Inclusion Advisor identifying something. So maybe it could have been like a sports analogy or something. Like sometimes I see stuff and I'm like, okay, I don't follow that certain type of sport, so I'm not familiar with. Actually, I feel like you're saying something positive, maybe not. So a lot of people are saying that. Or there could be, a gender-specific type of wording that might not be appropriate, or there could be wording that maybe might be, termed in one part of the world in one way and in another part of the world a different way. So again, calling out all of these nuances or biases, if you like, a lot of them are very unintentional, but one needs to know what they are in terms of changing and reflecting. And that's where, obviously, we with Merck and help support them in their initiative by using, Inclusion Reflections, Inclusion Advisor, and they had a dramatic change in how their employees felt about how they were being celebrated or recognized or included holistically in their overall company and their culture. So that was a really nice news story in relation to that, and how a company of that magnitude were able to shift the needle. So again, we started out talking about the big gap there and shifting the needle and bridging it and bringing it closer, whereby everybody feels very positive, everybody feels very inclusive, and all of the outcomes are positive holistically. So it is there, and I think technology, to answer your question and the poll you asked there, having technology certainly is probably the most inclusive way, if I can phrase it like that, in terms of having all of the different elements, as we've discussed along our conversation today, the metrics, the sentiment, the strategy, the elevation, the next step, thinking of our different generations and our profile makeup. I definitely think using technology to enable all of those things and promote all of those things is absolutely where people should be looking at.
And I think you must, because especially with organizations that size, it would be just impossible to do it any other way. Let's ask the audience the next poll. Does your organization have a formal DEI training program? Let's see what the audience says. I would love to see the answers on this one. We got 3 different answers. Yes, we have specialist courses for different job levels. That's A. B is yes, all employees receive the same training, and then C is no. So we'll give it a few more minutes. But this has been such an interesting case, and I would love to hear even more of these case studies. I know we're pressing on time, so we don't really have time for any more. But I guess if the audience would like to reach out to you to chat more about some of these topics and to chat with the team at Workhuman, they can reach you through LinkedIn or through us and get into a conversation on this. The poll answers are 16% is yes, we have a specialist course for different job levels. 39% is yes, all employees receive the same training, and 45% is a no. So obviously, there's still a lot of opportunities to talk about this topic, and it's great that we brought this topic to the table, because it's a discussion that we really need to have, and organizations across the globe should definitely have. Niam, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really, really lovely to have you with us. And now I would like to welcome to the stage our next speaker. So our next session is going to be on attracting talent through compelling and inclusive recruitment strategies. Mark Lohan, Head of Culture at Lloyd's of London. So I'd like to ask Mark hi Mark, great to have you with us.
How are you today?
Here, very good. Mark, I'll be in the background, so if you do need me, I'm here, but otherwise I shall turn off my microphone and my camera, and the virtual stage is all yours.
Excellent. And will my slides load?
Indeed they should. Let me do that. A second.
Great. Excellent. Well, it's an absolute pleasure for me to be with you this morning. I'm Mark Lomas, Head of Culture at Lloyd's of London. My role covers everything we do: diversity and inclusion internally, employee engagement, well-being, leadership capability, and then externally into the insurance market, oversight of the market in terms of culture, diversity, and non-financial misconduct. So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about rethinking your recruitment strategy from a D&I perspective. And I'm going to break down my talk into each stage of the recruitment process and demonstrate some of the pitfalls that I regularly see organizations fall into when trying to recruit a diverse group of talent, particularly where there are pitfalls all throughout the process that people just aren't thinking about. So let's start off with advertising and recruitment portals. Lots of organizations put lots of money into advertising their opportunities, ensuring that they're seen as an equal opportunities employer or embracing diversity. And one of the lessons that in my career, many organizations have learned is that increasingly your rhetoric needs to match your reality. And what do I mean by that? A lot of us are using now online digital portals for recruitment, and many organizations haven't thought about the need to have those portals be accessible, so meet WCAG 2.1 accessibility requirements or AA accessibility requirements. If not, that presents real challenges for anyone who might be utilizing assistive technology. Also thinking about the imagery that you're using on your site. We've seen plenty of times organizations say they really want to recruit a diverse cohort, and actually the images on their website or stock images are not representative of their staff. Before the explosion of social media, this might have been a little easier. The incongruence might have been a little easier to get away with. However, that's really obvious now to talent who can explore your website, explore your reporting, and look at your social media kind of footprint. So it is very, very important to ensure that your messages align and your imagery is a reflection of those people that actually work in your organization. Reaching different groups is often best accomplished through specialist advertising. So understanding where you have underrepresentation in your workforce and targeting those groups, maybe through publications they read, websites they visit, etc. The more sophisticated your attraction strategies and the more disaggregated and using your data they are, the more effective they can be. And at Lloyd's, we're particularly proud of our recruitment results, not only applicants at the beginning of the funnel, but the processes that we use which allow those results to be consistent across the various stages of the recruitment process. In the last few years, one of the most powerful devices we've seen in kind of authentic messaging around diversity and inclusion is employee advocacy. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think talent is now pretty familiar with glossy corporate adverts and advertising, which give the impression of being a diverse organization with an inclusive culture. But what's really cutting through is where it's your employees making those and delivering those messages, whether that be through short iPhone videos, which describe the type of job they do, why they like working at your organization, that go out concurrently with recruitment adverts. We've seen these type of approaches be very popular. Also, it's important to make sure that you're displaying your credentials around diversity and inclusion, whether you're taking part in benchmarking or undergoing diversity accreditation, and being upfront about those accreditations and awards you have. But again, it's very important that the rhetoric match the reality. And in the UK, we have Glassdoor, which allows anyone and everyone to give a review of their experience of your organization. And investing time ensuring a representative sample of people are leaving reviews on Glassdoor and other types of social media is incredibly important. Again, kind of helping that rhetoric match the reality. And we can see at Lloyd's, we can see really good results from the percentage of women that are applying for our roles straight through to the kind of nearly 50-50 hiring that we see all across the corporation. And indeed, as we push into the market our approach to inclusive recruitment, we can see again representation of women, ethnically diverse groups, disabled groups, LGBTQ plus groups increasing all across our insurance market. But one of the things that we have noticed is that despite all of our efforts, disability remains the area where most organizations find it harder. And when we talk to HR professionals and recruitment professionals, there does still seem to be a lack of knowledge and or confidence around reasonable adjustments, as we would call them in the UK, or workplace adjustments, in some territories called accommodations. And in the UK, part of that kind of reticence is about when can you ask an applicant about their health condition? When is it unlawful? When will it lead you down the wrong path? And at Lloyd's, we use a system called Clear Talents. The difference between Clear Talents and asking someone about health is quite clear. Clear Talents asks each applicant about the adjustments they need at each stage of the recruitment process, without a candidate ever having to say or declare a disability or a health condition. We find that this tool gives candidates a lot of confidence in expressing adjustments they might need in the recruitment process. For example, if we've asked them to do an assessment and they might need to do that assessment in a different format, they can request these adjustments at the point of need throughout the recruitment process. And this has really helped build the confidence of disabled applicants applying to Lloyd's. Lloyd's is a disability confident leader, which is a disability accreditation in the UK. And again, we can see increasing applications and increasing job offers for disabled people through our programs. And I think the important thing for us is we also, as people join the organization, we have a robust process of capturing adjustments, again, through our Clear Talents tool. And the important thing is for this, there can be a perception gap where, for example, someone might meet the Equality Act definition of a disabled person, but they might not perceive themselves to be disabled. Clear Talents allows us essentially to focus on the adjustment, and that a declaration of disability or personal perception of disability isn't the most important aspect. To date, 13% of our staff have substantive or moderate workplace adjustments versus just 4% that would actually perceive or declare themselves to have a disability. And again, this allows us to do what is most important for the organization, which is ensure that we're putting in place the adjustments which enable high performance and enable people to be themselves at work. And I think that's the key point. Adjustments through the recruitment process and adjustments for new starters allow people to perform at their best during the interview process. And our interview processes and our recruitment processes are about getting the absolute maximum out of people that we can. But this brings me along to one of the first pitfalls. And this is an area where, I'm sure it's the same for many organizations on this call. If you go through your website and pick out a few job descriptions, these are some of the issues that we see crop up time and time and time again. Number one, desirable criteria. So something might be desirable or preferred. Basically, it's not essential for the role. And desirable criteria just allow role profiles to grow. Unnecessary qualifications, such as must have a degree. A degree in what? Related to the role. How are you going to test that in the recruitment process? A lot of personality-related descriptors. Outgoing, ambitious, drive, etc. Gender-centric and or other forms of biased language, and jargon and acronyms. All of these are key things to avoid in a job description. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through a live example of an entry-level job description in the insurance market. So you can see exactly how this plays out. So I'll give you a moment just to read the advert on screen. This is for an entry-level role for a claims handler position. I'll give you a second just to read the advert. Now, on the surface, you might look at that and think, well, it's not great, but what's particularly wrong with it? Well, let's start with the diversity of the insurance market itself. 43% of the market are women, 11% are ethnically diverse, 4% disabled, and 4% LGBTQ+. So as we explore this job description, we start to see how this might impact diverse groups. So first of all, given the stats that I just read out, and being this is an entry-level role, the first challenge is on industry experience. And you'll note the job description asks for not only industry experience, but a specific type of industry experience. So again, we're eliminating candidates that we want to bring into the sector at the stroke of a keyboard because of lazy job descriptions. Then, where are the skills and knowledge actually required to do the role? Again, this is mainly an administration role. And again, good relationship building skills. And again, there are some male-centric descriptors in here as well. We then see the rest of it is fairly personality-based. And you might think about how a candidate might interpret being well-spoken, being confident, being personal. It's all geared to a very extrovert kind of lens. And in the UK, well-spoken has some connotations for where you come from, level of education, etc. All of this is setting an image in the candidate's mind of what a good candidate might be. And so you can see, as we've gone through that description, that again we've sliced and diced our talent pool almost immediately, and that happens before we get to the bulk of the assessment. And again, one of the key things we found when looking across our whole market, and again in my experience during my career, looking at a number of organizations, is there isn't a lot of flexibility in the assessment methodologies. We are starting to see different methodologies now for early careers, apprentices and graduates versus experienced hires. But in the main, organizations tend to use one or two recruitment models only. And there are a wealth of good recruitment models that you can use for different sorts of roles. Competency-based interviewing for experienced roles, ensuring that the competency frameworks themselves have been reviewed through a D&I lens and an occupational psychology lens to eliminate bias as far as possible. At Lloyd's, we use strengths-based interviewing and assessment for our early careers, for our apprentices and graduates, and that kind of recruitment model delivers a wonderfully diverse cohort of early careers, whereas a competency-based model is essentially testing your experience. A strengths-based model is testing transferable skills and others. So again, it is very useful for early careers. We use skills-based assessment when testing for some technical roles. When I've used this at previous employers, the change in shortlisting success has been absolutely dramatic. I've used a recruitment model called blind auditioning before, which removes, it's not just removing things from a CV, it's an entirely anonymous skills-based assessment, which the line manager helps to craft from the job description that goes out to all candidates anonymously. Those results are then marked against a model answer and algorithm, and then those that score the highest are invited to interview. When I've used that previous, there's been a 30 to 50% jump in success rates, both for women and ethnically diverse groups within recruitment processes. And that is not because the diverse talent just got brilliant overnight. It's because when you actively change the selection methodology and how decisions are made, the results speak for themselves. Situational judgment tests, again, are another type of assessment that can be used, again, very popular in early careers. Assessment centers, I'm a big fan of assessment centers, not only for early careers, but also for selecting middle management, where you can test both technical skills and you can test management skills. And video and remote interviewing. It's becoming more and more and more popular. But again, just like the accessibility of your website, you really do need to put some thought into how accessible that experience is, both from a technology point of view and how people engage with your platform. And the key kind of point here is different recruitment models work best for different roles and career stages. And no matter how great your recruitment process is, no matter how much time you've spent on your attraction, how much thought you've given to your recruitment models themselves, it can still fall down if you don't have recruiters who are trained or who are expert in inclusive recruitment. So at Lloyd's, every single recruitment manager must be accredited in inclusive hiring. You are only allowed to recruit if you've passed the course, and the courses give you very specific skills around shortlisting, around interviewing, around understanding evidence and challenging bias. It has helped us shift the recruitment outcomes at Lloyd's significantly. And again, it is part of our requirement and expectation that managers are able to recruit in a way that is both effective and inclusive. And by doing that, we're able to make the most of the candidates and their experience. Not only is it important to have trained recruiters, but also to think about the diversity of those groups on your recruitment panel. And there are all kinds of things to consider when it comes to kind of assessments and those on your panel. So I'll deal with assessments first, and I'll talk about the panel then. Sort of our evidence and our data shows that the more information we give candidates about how they are being assessed, the higher the bar is for everyone. So, for example, if we're using competency-based selection processes, we provide information on the type of evaluation to all candidates. It just helps level the playing field so people understand how they're being evaluated. They can then best prepare. And increasingly, as we see neurodiversity and in the workplace, there are adjustments that we've begun to make for certain conditions by providing questions in written format 10 minutes before the start of the interview, so that candidates have time to look through the wording, understand what to do, and plan their response. Again, an inclusive recruitment process is about raising the standard by making sure that everyone has the best opportunity to submit the best evidence. It's not about the rapport built between recruiter and the candidate. It is an evidence-based selection process. And it's very important that is at the heart of our approach. To bolster that, we use diverse interview panels. So we have created a pool of over 30 diverse interviewers from all parts of the business and covering all protected characteristics or diverse communities. They've all been accredited in inclusive recruitment, and they've made a commitment to conduct a minimum of 4 interviews per year. And we deliberately pull that diverse interview pool from our Lloyd's Together Inclusion Network. You may be familiar with them as employee resource groups or other terms. But we get our diverse interview pools from there, and also from those taking part in our leadership development programs. And this is incredibly important. Number one, a balance of people on the panel gives you different perspectives, different parts of the business. It also gives those individuals in our ERGs and our high potential talent directly linked into our business strategy and goals on diversity and inclusion, and ensures that they feel that they are contributing to the progress of a diverse workforce across the business. So it gives the real kind of it gives an answer to the so what behind the ERGs and leadership development. They're getting baked into decision making across the organization. But none of this matters if you can't evidence how you're doing. And tracking and measuring our success is one of the most critical factors in achieving better recruitment performance. So number one, tracking recruitment and diversity at each stage of the process. So you know what percentage of applicants you have versus what percentage of those applicants go on to shortlist and go on to interview, go on to hire. And within that data, we're looking for adverse impact. So for example, we have 50% of women applicants, but only 20% make it through shortlisting, 15% get to interview and no hires. We would be looking at that, saying there is adverse impact at each stage. And how do we therefore adjust the process, the recruitment model, provide additional guidance to rectify that adverse impact? A lot of organizations mistake the fact that they don't get diversity at the end of the hiring process for a need to do more advertising or more promotion. In my experience, that's almost never the case. A majority of the impact is found through the various stages. And this leads me on to accountability. So at Lloyd's, we have a target of 35% women in leadership and a 1 in 3 hiring ambition for ethnically diverse groups, both in the corporation and the wider market. And it's essential that managers have KPIs related to this, and that we are able to provide them with the data for them to understand how their decision making is playing out. And it is linked to their remuneration. So it's linked to their bonus qualification. But it's not just us who does direct hiring. We require all our recruitment suppliers to have some kind of external D&I accreditation. And the vehicle we use is called Clear Assured at Lloyd's. And it's extremely important to us that we have assurance and an audit mechanism so that we know our recruitment suppliers are meeting the standards that we have in relation to inclusive recruitment. And then the last is accountability. All senior leaders are provided with not only their diversity workforce stats, but also their hiring stats quarterly through our dashboard, allowing them to track our recruitment targets and how their area of the business is performing. This is really key to a culture of accountability. And it's also very useful around the senior leadership table across functions when peers can challenge each other on whether one function is doing better or one function is doing worse, but it's impacting the overall enterprise performance. Peers can then hold each other to account. And again, the key message for me here is understanding where in your recruitment process issues are so that you can proactively adjust those processes. So thank you very much for your time this morning, and I'm happy to take questions if there's time for Q&A.
Mark, thank you so much. We do have one question from Venus Gilbert. How do you make a strategy for neurodiverse population, especially because it's a very sensitive area and there are regulations around collecting these data? So I guess the first part of the question you've answered that through your presentation, but the second part is the regarding the regulations. What would you say on that?
Yeah. So in the UK, we can collect information around disability. However, we don't rely on that. We utilize our Clear Talents tool, which essentially only asks someone if they need particular adjustments at work, not why, but what those adjustments might be. So, for example, someone could request when going through the application process that can I have the interview questions 10 minutes before the start of the interview, and we would understand that that's an adjustment they need. Or I might need extra time for written assignments because of dyslexia, for example. But they would be able to request those adjustments through our Clear Talents profile without declaring to us disability status.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Mark, thank you so much for this presentation. It's been great, and I'm guessing if people would like to know a little bit more about the story, they can reach out to you. I guess LinkedIn would be the best way to reach out. And ladies and gentlemen, again, Mark, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our second session, and our next session is our panel discussion. The topic is what will workplace DEI look like by 2025, and what should HR executives be doing today to prepare?
Our panelists, Stuart Curtis, Senior Director of Global Talent Development at Workhuman, Khushbu Patel, Head of Engagement and Inclusion at Metro Bank, and Christoph Haldi, Chief People Officer at Ringier. I'd like to ask our panelists to please join me on the stage. Hello, Stuart, great to have you. Christoph, great to have you. Khushbu, great to have you. Khushbu, we can't yet see you or hear you, but I can see that your microphone's on now, so that's great. Your video is still not with us. How is everyone today? How have you enjoyed the session so far?
Excellent, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, fantastic, Thomas. I really enjoyed. Obviously, Neve, her session is very familiar to me. I really enjoyed that, but Mark's session was eye-opening. Really enjoyed the discussion around it, and even Venus's question around neurodiversity. So, Venus, we recently, while we're waiting for Khushbu to get her camera working, we recently refreshed our offices in Dublin, and part of that refresh was we built in biophilic walls, so walls that have plants growing in them. We created quiet spaces. We created no noise areas. So without asking people, are you neurodiverse or do you need special accommodations, we built them in as standard. And it kind of resonated with me very strongly there when Marcus, we don't ask about what the reason for the accommodation is, but we'll ask you, can we give you any accommodations? How can we help you? And really appreciated it. It's fantastic work by Mark and his team.
Awesome. Sounds very interesting. Now, until we wait for Khushbu, maybe we can jump into it, because we do have quite a few questions here that we've sort of put together, and perhaps I'll start with Christoph. Why and how did you launch the Equal Voice initiative at Ringier?
Yeah, thank you very much. Really great pleasure to be here on this panel. Joining in, getting hungry, joining in from Zurich. I've heard some people are still waiting for lunch, and some are already past, looking at people coming from joining in from Azerbaijan. So really great to be here. Thank you. So Equal Voice Initiative, Ringier is very proud to be the initiator of the Equal Voice Initiative. It was founded in 2019. It's very interesting. Our CFO, she stumbled across some figures, and she saw that in a report, she saw that from all articles published in Switzerland in 2019, only 72%, and 72% of those articles were representing men. So she thought, okay, there's a gender imbalance there. And I have some more recent data. So from 2021, according to the Global Media Monitoring Report from 2021, the global figure is as high as 82%. So if you have media articles published about humans, 82% represented men globally. And well, Annabella, she hired me about 10 years ago. She loves data. So she said, and she loves the saying, I think there are two sayings. One is what gets measured gets done. And she loves the one, what gets measured gets managed. So she was reaching out to our editors-in-chief in our media brands. And she tried to convince them to implement a measurement for the visibility of women in media. And that was the birth of Equal Voice. So in essence, the goal is to increase visibility of women in media, to create role models, and basically give men and women, this gender topic, I'm not going beyond that, but just a gender topic, give women and men an equal voice. It's for many organizations, I think, also a starting point. It was for us, it was later to kicking off the whole discussion about diversity and inclusion, so widening that picture, but first starting with the gender discussion, which is obvious in most organizations. And at the core of equal voice, we have that simple measurement, equal voice factor. So we have developed in one of our tech teams, we have developed an algorithm, so semantic algorithm that reads across the text and creates a measurement of representation of men and women. And we've validated that by the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology last year. So it is not a biased, as far as we can. We try to avoid the bias. It's not a biased measurement. It's really trying. And we have also, in the meantime, further developed the factor, so we can also recognize images. So the actual algorithm that reads through the digitized papers, articles, can be print articles that are then scanned, or it's online articles. And it can also, just this year on the Equal Voice Summit, we've announced that the factor technology can also read moving images, so video, so it can recognize men and women. So what have we learned from that? Of course, you set targets, because as I said at the beginning,
Christoph, for some reason you're muted. You must have pressed mute for a moment. But Kishba, great to have you with us.
Hello, I'm so sorry about the technical issues.
Not at all, not at all. And Christoph, I think we've lost you about a minute ago. So if you can please continue from around there, that would be great.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm really sorry about that. I was
not at all.
heavily engaged about that, because it kicked off a lot. But yeah, coming back to the equal voice factor, I'd like to repeat that we can measure not only text but also images and moving images, so videos. And what we have learned, we have 32 media brands are using the technology, and they're not just within the Ringier group. We also have the first media brands from outside our portfolio. So we're trying to grow that across, because we say it's independent. It's got nothing to do with Ringier. It's about women and men represented in media, and in 7 European countries. So the media brands in 7 European countries. What have we seen? Of course, you have a variation of representation depending on your readership and on your brand. So if you have a sports brand, you would expect, depending on what sports it is, to have more men than women. And of course, if you have, for example, a people brand, you'd rather have more women, or gardening. The thing is, you start measuring and you set targets. And I really like that from Niam at the beginning. So measuring in reporting, her entry keynote, it was so important. It's so important to measure. And we have increased the visibility, which wasn't really easy. It was sometimes difficult to convince people. Very interesting was images. And what we saw, what is really interesting, we started with product. Usually initiatives, D&I initiatives, start with people. You look at your workforce, you look at your resources, and we started at product. So our service, and then we took the discussion inside and we realized, wow, it just generates all these ideas. Hey, what's happening? And just let me go on one little thing. Wikipedia. We all love Wikipedia. Did you know that only 7% of articles are actually written by women?
Oh, wow.
So that's another thing we touched into, because we learned that through that. And so, yeah, very long speech about the equal voice. We love it.
Thanks, Christoph. And I guess that I mean, it's interesting. We probably talk about it for another 20 minutes or even longer. But I'd like to ask Kishbo a question on how will the definition and vision of DEI develop in the next 2 years, in your opinion?
Thank you, Thomas. I think, You look at the past 10 years, for example, and the landscape has transformed so much. What was just diversity became diversity and inclusion, became diversity, equity, inclusion. And more recently, we've got focus around belonging, and that's just the definition. So, I imagine the definition is going to continue to evolve as we see more focus on the concept. But one thing's for sure, that despite whatever the definition is, the future is going to bring a deeper emphasis on creating a sense of belonging and inclusivity for all colleagues. And then this becomes placing a true focus where we all belong with genuine psychological safety. I think there's various ways in which I see this happening. So first is the advancement of belonging for more diversity strands. So I think traditionally when you look at companies in general, you focus on sex, and perhaps if you're a little bit more advanced, you look at ethnicity as well, right? But the future should see advancement towards equality for the LGBTQ plus community, for differently abled people, for different genders and socioeconomic backgrounds. And then not just looking at strands as individuals, looking at intersectionality. And so how these characteristics cross and integrate, and taking a deeper look at advancements within science as well. So there's so much research, there's examples of neurodiversity and belonging. And ultimately, all of this research then builds the scientific case for DEI and why it's so important. And then all of this then impacts lots of other colleague engagement trends. You've got hybrid working, data analytics, talent and leadership models. I think as society, we're just at the beginning of this journey. In years to come, DEI is going to go beyond the compliance, beyond this sort of newish concept. And the future needs to be led by organisations that really embed these principles into their core values, look at what an inclusive culture really means, and then ensure that equity and in fairness is at all levels. And all of this comes from driving actions towards colleague belonging, making your colleagues feel valued and respected and empowered to contribute whatever their unique perspective is, because all of that in itself is the future for success, not seeing just one side of it, seeing it all. And that plays into what I just caught at the end there, what Christoph is saying around the Equal Voice initiative. It's about seeing and hearing an equal voice from everybody.
Thank you, Kishbo, indeed. And I'd like to direct the question to Stuart now. Your new CHRO, Kian Schmidt, has made DEI a top priority. Tell us, why is this so critical, and why DEI start with acceptance?
Yeah, great question, Thomas. Thank you. And Kiana has introduced, as I had a quick catch up with her as she joined the organization, we have a formal DEI program like many other organizations, but instead of DEI, Kiana talked about acceptance. And as I look at, we've got statistics to reinforce this constantly, but as we look to the future of our workforce, as we look to who's coming in, Gen Z, and I don't want this to turn into a support group for people with teenagers, but I have a 22-year-old and two 19-year-olds, and they ask me very pointed questions about acceptance. They expect diverse inclusion, belonging, they expect diversity, but they ask about acceptance. And a recent Johns Hopkins report has highlighted that 88% of Gen Z employees coming into a workplace expect to be asked about their preferred pronouns, which is something that wouldn't have existed, 5-10 years ago in a workplace. But now this new generation expect this. And if we're going to attract and retain that kind of talent into our organizations, as the millennial organization or the millennial groups move through and are replaced by Gen Z, we gotta think differently, and we gotta be accepting of all people coming into the organization. And just again, from Khushbu, you mentioned psychological safety. Gosh, we have so much work to do on it, and we do so much work on it. But our own research with Gallup has shown that if an employee feels psychologically safe, that they can ask questions, that they can challenge, that they can raise their hands and say, hey, I don't know this, and do it without any fear of recrimination, that you have a 27% lower employee turnover, you 40% reduction in safety incidents. So if you think about that alone, the drive to have zero accidents and to have zero deaths in a workplace is very high in certain organizations. And gosh, if you feel like you can ask questions or challenge how something is done, there's a 40% reduction in safety incidents and then 12% increase in productivity. And just, for myself, I suppose, from a connection to culture perspective, I'm going to share, with everybody here, and I feel like we know each other. We've talked quite a lot, and I see lots of chats, so I feel like we know each other. Workhuman is the first organization that I've shared what my date of birth is, as in when my birthday is. It's the first organization that we've celebrated my birthday, and it was an incredible. I was very nervous about it, and it was an incredible moment to actually have colleagues and people in a wider circle around me, almost 1,000 people, wish me happy birthday on my birthday. And I got to say, I was nervous doing it. I'm over 3 years with the organization. Each year I celebrate my birthday with the organization, but we do that through a platform where I feel accepted, I feel seen, I feel like there's a genuine connection. And then, I feel like that. But then, Christoph, when you talk about equal voices, I saw an advert here in Ireland, and you can probably tell from the accent I'm from Ireland. And it was very young girls in a school being asked, they were shown photographs of sports people, female sports people, and they were asked, can you name this person? And it's Katie Taylor, and it's Amber Barrett, and it's all these superstars, these elite athletes of Irish sport, and very few of them could name them. But then when they were all shown a photo of Conor McGregor, they could all name Conor McGregor. They could all name Johnny Sexton. And it kind of crushed me a little bit. And then it highlighted only, female sports only get 6% of the coverage that male sports gets here in Ireland. And I was kind of like, I've got 2 daughters, and I'm a firm believer in that. If you can see it, you can be it. I work with some incredibly talented women like Neve, like Kiana, and I talk about them quite openly, how wonderful it is to work with them. So my daughters get exposure to that, but I'm kind of crushed as I think about the number of daughters around the world who don't get to see that or hear about it. And it just, today's lifted me up, so I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. But I was a little bit crushed by that yesterday. So I'm delighted to hear, Christoph, that you're doing such wonderful work around that area also. Thank you.
Indeed. Stuart, thank you for this this very personal sharing of some of these thoughts. And I couldn't agree more. I have a teenage daughter as well, and I think she's more emotionally intelligent and more aware of the diversity and inclusion than what we were in high school. 10 times fold more. So it is definitely something that is really going to be in the next. It already is, but it's even going to be more and more in the spotlight, and organizations really have to be aware of this even more. A few other questions I have, if we have a bit more time, and I guess this is for all of you. While diversity and inclusion has been embraced in all of your organizations, what are the biggest challenges do you face, and how do you address them? So maybe Khushbu, if I can start with you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest challenges around diversity, equity, inclusion is the journey, and it takes time. So it's human nature that you want to see results from all the efforts being made. You want to see the grand movements on all the actions that you're undertaking, right? And I think it's really important here to understand DEI is not a place of attainment, it's a way of life. A Metro Bank is part of our culture, it's part of everything we do. And so take a moment to look at all of the small shifts. At the moment, we're coming up at Metro Bank of 100 small things we've done towards inclusion in the last year. And actually, when we sum it up, it's looking at all of these small changes and how they amount up to the cultural change. And I think that's the challenge, going on the journey and being patient with the journey, because behavioural change always takes time, right? And you look in society, I mean, we talked about some personal stories. I went to see Disney's Elemental a couple of weeks ago. Great film. And I was talking to my stepson about it afterwards. And, I've grown up in a world where traditionally and stereotypically women would be more emotional and men would be more angry, right? That's the stereotype, and we know it's not true. And it's really interesting because he didn't see that stereotype at 9 years old. And I'm like, that's great. That's a great progression in society. But it's not a flick of a switch. It's these small things that take place and you see that change. So I think one of the biggest challenges is being patient with that change and just keep at it, because it will work.
Indeed, indeed. Christopher, anything to add from your side?
One of the big challenges for me is that we're a decentralized organization. So we're active in 19 countries in Europe and in the sub-Saharan region. So it's very interesting that different aspects of DEI are on a different, I don't know, discussion. I don't want to say maturity level, but it's somehow how DEI is perceived in a culture, and you can't generalize. And the big challenge is, I don't want to use stereotypes, but I see that, for example, in Hungary, I don't have the kids or career discussion that I have in Switzerland. In Switzerland, I have a real kids or career discussion with women. It's absolutely terrible. The state that I have to represent, or the country represents, so many studies showing that in Hungary, that's not a big deal. But with the where we stand there, also with the political surroundings, talking about LGBTQIA+, you have a real issue. So you have different starting points, different discussion angles, and you could just we always said one size fits all is a no-so, but particularly there with all the different organizations, it's exactly those that, like what Khushbu says, those little things, you try this and you just have to spread it out. And the big challenge is find the little initiatives that have an impact, that make an impact. And the other challenge is, I think, also the definition. I really like what Khushbu said on that at the beginning, that it's just part acceptance. And for me, it's respect is a big word. It's just that respect, that genuine respect that is there for the other person, for just anything, that this becomes part. And it's not, for me, it's definitely not an HR driven thing. It's not HR driven. Okay, I'm the people officer, I'm there for the people, but that I like that respect and acceptance.
This word genuine, that's a key word there.
Yeah,
indeed. Thanks, Christoph. Stuart, anything from your side?
Yeah, I really appreciate the nod towards patience. I think we're always rushing. We're always, what are the instant returns that happen? And if it hasn't happened within 6 months, then some organizations feel like this isn't working. And just looking again at our own research, 4% of organizations feel like their DEI processes are working, and they're struggling with where to begin. And I think, as HR professionals join sessions like this and get great ideas and inspiration on how can they kick off something, how can they start, well done is better than well said. But the case studies that we have as well, we work with Mark, as Niamh mentioned, and Mark have introduced that kind of technology, the poll that you had earlier, Thomas, about, do you just trust people's good intentions? Well, unfortunately, that's where microaggressions can come out, or, poor choice of language, or, it's read in one way. So we've built into our recognition platform an inclusion advisor, which scans the text as somebody types it and will recommend, subtle changes to make sure that it's inclusive, fully inclusive language. But there's also marker using inclusion reflections, which nudges somebody who's nominating peers to make sure that they have recognized all of the individuals. And it's about that inclusion of all that I think is really critical. There's nothing worse than being, part of a team, part of a virtual team or a project team. And Christoph, you talk about a highly diverse geographic teams. There's nothing worse than being part of a diverse geographic team and being forgotten about in the recognition. That really stings. And, again, being reminded, you've got 1.3 times lower turnover for employees who receive those awards and things like that. So from a business perspective, you can argue it all stacks up, DEI all stacks up. But I did have the privilege of sitting in on a meeting. I won't use the person's name, but the CEO of Vodafone Group was talking about a diversity and inclusion project that was kicking off. And someone in the room started talking about all the business reasons why we're doing this in Vodafone Group when I was with them. And they had all these statistics and were arguing with all these statistics. And the CEO, Vittorio Calao at the time, held up his hand and just said, hey, let's stop that. This is the right thing to do. That's all people need to know. And I thought that was so wonderfully inspiring. You know, it really resonated. And I've been very fortunate to have moments where I've been in the room as something like that is said, and it changes my perspective. And then it's like those little ripples in a pond. Vittorio said that in front of me and many others. And then we take that mindset out. So yes, we've got all the business reasons and all the statistics, but it's just the right thing to do. And if we do the right thing like that, we'll attract better talent, more diverse talent, but we'll retain that talent, you know. So very excited about this. But I do think, Khushbu, you've nailed it with the patience piece.
Indeed. I think we have time for one more question, and this is an interesting one. How can you ensure that DEI is authentic and not just a box-ticking exercise? So, Khushbu, maybe I'll start with you again, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, like at the core of it, it's DEI is all about creating that equitable, inclusive culture at work, right? And to do this well, it needs to have an impact on your culture. And for anything to have an impact on culture, it requires behavioural change. And I just think like behavioural change is so hard to fake in the long run. In the short run, you can sign up to charters, you know, have grand marketing campaigns, all the usual tokenism. But in the long run, you've got to be authentic and meaningful. And then to do that, you've got to be strategic about what you do and be really intentional. You know, it goes to making sure that all of your actions are sponsored through executives, you know, making sure, you know, like Stuart said, that making sure the people at the top, that Vodafone story, that really know it's the right thing to do and have all of the leaders role model what you're doing. So, you know, to do this, assess where you are and plan based on the assessment, because then you're doing things and creating initiatives around things you know that's actually going to work on your organization. I think too many times you see people with all of these sort of grand initiatives almost throwing hats on a stand hoping one of them will stick, and when they look around and they're like, oh, there's no difference being made, it's because you're ticking the box and you're not going to see the results. You know, at the very best you've wasted some resources, but at the very worst you're taking a step backwards, because whenever you do things out of tokenism, it creates that culture of cynicism and distrust. Right. And look, colleagues are intelligent people, they're going to see through superficial gestures, and I think the other key part of this is understanding that DEI is beneficial for everyone. So please don't ask that one woman or that one person of colour or someone from that LGBTQ plus community, go, here you go, take the lead and talk about DEI. That's not genuine. It's, you know, beneficial for everyone, not just the underrepresented group. So do the right thing and be authentic, and then you'll see the results. And then you go away from this tick box side.
Indeed, indeed. Well said. Stuart, what are your views on this?
I would find it very difficult to add more than Khushbu has added there. I think the critical thing is the executive support, as you said, Khushbu, you know, that authentic, if this is, you know, like Vittorio was very clear, this is the right thing to do as the CEO of Vodafone Group. So he was driving that agenda out throughout a whole organization of 120, 130,000 people in 26 different markets, but that was being driven from the very top. This is important, this is critical, it is the right thing to do. That kind of genuine, you know, support from the executive level. And again, very lucky to work in an organization that has that. But also from our own perspective, I suppose that authentic piece comes from celebrating the whole human. And I don't want to, you know, rehash the story of the first time I celebrated my birthday in 25 years of working was with Workhuman, but it felt god-awful nice to be able to just relax and celebrate it. And we celebrate a lot of non-work related accomplishments for people so that they can bring their whole self to work. And it's up to them what they share and what they don't share. But people buying a new home, people getting a new pet, like that's a huge thing for them, new baby into the house, you know, those kind of things. and celebrating that whole human, the complete human into the workplace. So I'd advise that as organizations are looking at how can they do this more authentically.
Indeed, Christoph, from a few words from your side. We've got two more minutes on the panel.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to be short. Absolutely, as I said, we started with the top management. So equal voice came from the CFO, and we have in Switzerland we have a leadership course for young leaders, and in I think February, March, I was visiting those young leaders with the CEO, and he said it is not a marketing exercise. No, it's not. It never was. It's genuine. And what I've learned is when because you need patience, love that. Top management, my peers on the board, group executive board, they sometimes lose patience a bit. And that's where the ERGs come in. I've really learned that the employee resource groups, they need to see that those sparkles are working. And so you don't point them out, but we really try to make workshops and discussions, very open discussions. We give out 3-4 topics, and we get people together, and you work in an intimate format. You also have some ground rules there regarding what is said here stays here. And then people come in and open up, and then you slowly can start. So I have now, the queer community was really simple. We by the way, we dropped the LGBTQIA+ because we said queer is so much easier. That came from the ERG. They said we want to be called queer. We do the pride. We do this. We do the rainbow balloon arch in the entrance. So they came up. This Pride Month was just great. So we have now generations coming up and families/parents coming up. Very, very simple, but it's bottom up, and that's where you gain traction again. So it is a top down first, of course, but I truly believe that you have to generate that traction bottom up, and that's hard work, and you have to be patient and keep going.
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you all for this great conversation. We could probably still keep going for another 30 minutes if we have the time, but unfortunately it's the end of our session. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Chris, Bro, Stuart, Christoph, thank you for your contribution. Indeed, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, this actually concludes our last session, and also concludes the series of forums that we were running here with the support of Workhuman. We do encourage you to reach out. You will receive the opportunity to watch all the sessions on demand. So please do that, and network, get engaged, get connected, and if you have similar stories or ideas that you'd like to share, I'm sure that our speakers would love to have a conversation on these. So thanks again, and I'd like to encourage everyone to join us at our physical event that's going to be coming up, the Horizon Summit. It's a CHR and HR Leaders Summit. It is in partnership with Workhuman. So Workhuman is a key partner of this event, and we would definitely love to have you guys on board. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. See you again next time.
Thank you.